Good morning, and welcome to another edition of The Road To. I am Patty Morrissey, your host, and we have an illustrious panel of experienced pundits and politicians around me. So we're going to get started by introducing each one of them. Let's start with John Flannery.
Oh, well, that's a good start. I'm a recovering federal prosecutor, and I practice representing the abused and misunderstood, and I write comments and appear and talk about what I think are current issues. And I think we're in an exciting period in Loudoun County where we have, 24, 25 candidates up for various offices, and we're lucky to have a couple of those nominees with us today.
All right. John's on our left. On our right is Jim Parmalee.
I was going to say, am I the abused and misunderstood on this show? I might need your services. I'm Jim Parmalee. I run the Northern Virginia Republican PAC, Republicans United for Tax Relief, and I'll be the lone Republican on this show today.
It's a lonely position.
Somebody's got to do it.
We also have two candidates with us. I'll start with Kristen Umstattd, who's been longtime mayor of Leesburg and running for a seat on the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, Patty, thank you. I'm a U.S. Naval veteran and have been mayor of the town of Leesburg, which is a great town, for 13 years, and I'm running for the Leesburg district seat on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors.
Okay, and we'll get more into that later in the show. And my friend Phyllis Randall, who is running for chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. And Phyllis, who's been on the show many times as a pundit.
And now I'm
Give us your political intro.
This is interesting to sit in a different seat, not the pundit seat. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm actually, running for chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. What's interesting is by law, it's actually the term is chairman. And so we have to get that changed very soon after I take office, because that's not acceptable to let that stand any longer. I'm a political activist, especially in the field of education. I'm the immediate past chair of the Virginia Fair Housing Board and the current vice chair of the Virginia Board of Corrections. And I just want to say real quickly that I have two nephews, Robert and Jared, who are being baptized next week.
Aww.
And I want to tell them I love you so much and we're so proud of you.
Excellent. And a little bit more on your career background, because I think it's relevant in terms of policies and local and state politics.
Yes, by career, I'm a mental health therapist. I happen to work in a jail, and my emphasis area is substance abuse. And some of the issues that have taken place, unfortunately, in Loudoun this week speak to the fact that we really do need more services in the substance in the mental health services, not just in Loudoun County, but countywide. Right now in Loudoun County, we have about a 4-month waiting list when somebody comes in for mental health services.
Crazy.
To get them in, which actually is it's very disturbing. And I think people don't realize that under the term of mental health disorders is the disease of addiction. And most people don't realize that, and they don't see that as something that needs to be treated in the same way. Addiction does not need to be treated as a crime. It needs to be treated as a disease. It needs to be treated. Yeah. And when you don't have, and not punished, and when you don't have that, you often end up, one, costing the taxpayers more money, because it's always cost effective to treat and do prevention on any disease than to respond to it. So first of all, it costs the taxpayers more money, and secondly, it destroys lives, because it's a lethal, fatal disease that, when untreated, destroys lives. And so it is really unfortunate when we look just the things that happen in Loudoun this week, that of course what happened last year with Senator Deeds and his son. We have all these examples of needing to have a much more robust, much more responsive mental health community, and it seems to be one of the first things that gets cut. And let me finally quickly say, I think one reason that mental health services get cut so often is because mental health is a disease that you can't see.
Yeah.
In other diseases, when people deteriorate, you can see it, but you can't see mental health, and so people tend to think it's not an issue.
Yeah. And they focus on the behavior and not where it's coming from.
We do. So yeah, exactly.
Well, we can get into that a little bit more later. We usually start from kind of broad federal, sort of larger issues, and kind of narrow down into specific local issues. So our producer would like us to address the email situation with our was leading Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Hillary Clinton. So I'm not sure how much expertise people have here. I have a little, but I'm just the dumb moderator. So I'm going to start with Jim.
Well, I'm not sure how much expertise you need in deleting or deleting emails that are national security concerns and pretending you never had them. So I think Hillary Clinton has mastered that. I think here's the key thing. She knew she was not supposed to have an outside email. She knew she was not supposed to have an outside server. She did. She then told people that there was nothing, no national security information on it. Turns out there was. Then she says, well, it wasn't. I didn't know it was at the time. Turns out that she either did or was incompetent and not to see the classified information and not realize that it was classified.
Well, I mean, everything that she did was national security related. So.
Well, I was even giving her, I was even giving her the benefit of the doubt. But yes. So at least some are all of the information on her server was illegal to have outside on an unsecured server. So after having done all that and after having danced around with legal words to try to figure out how to sound innocent, I guess it all depends on what the meaning of is. It turns out that the Secretary of State held classified information on a private server under her control that would make it easier for others to have.
I just have to say a little bit about that, just because I live in this dual reality all the time. Mm-hmm. I was reading stuff at work that was labeled top secret and went home, and my daughter says to me, "Hey Mom, did you hear about the chemical weapons da-da-da-da-da?" And that was top secret at work, and my college daughter had already watched it on TV. So I just want to say there is no God of what's classified and not out there where it's a black and white thing. So I think there's a lot of mixed.
Hold on, but there is a classification. The government does step in and say there's a classification.
But the media gets stuff all the time that is.
That doesn't.
Kristen will
you'd be fired if you did that.
I'm going to go to John.
You'd be fired if you did that.
I'm enjoying the partisan desperation. First of all, we overclass.
What would you do?
I'd probably bring her in and talk to her and say, "Mock nix, nothing happened," and let her go. I would scare the hell out of her and everybody else, and we would be more careful, as we are. And if she weren't a presidential nominee and a woman, you wouldn't care about this at all. If it was a Republican who was dousing the internet with information they thought was harmful to their political opponents, oh my God. And first of all, we overclassify. On the Hill, I never took a top secret clearance because I always thought it was a trap. Because then I couldn't talk about an issue I could find about any place else almost that was overclassified, and then they would come and try to muzzle me or anybody else who had this top security clearance against speaking on an issue that they otherwise could talk about because of all that stuff that's out there. There is not a single instance of any of this so-called classified information that has compromised anything anywhere on the planet.
We don't know that because you don't
know that. You can sit down with a comfy chair and a huge pot of coffee and read every one of these things. They're on the internet now.
You're saying that it's all out there.
It is all out there.
It's not because she deleted a lot of them. She wiped her hard drive
and you know what they were.
And then pretended she didn't know what wiping a hard drive was.
And you know what they were.
Well,
is there a single thing that you claim was deleted of which you cannot prove?
I'd like to get Kristen's perspective.
But you know what this is exactly like? What this is like? If Nixon had gone and burned the tapes on the front yard of the White House, that would have been what she did. She wiped her hard drive.
5 witnesses who told us what he was saying, so we knew that there was something he was destroying.
So what you're saying is that Nixon was more open than Clinton.
Jim, okay, let's stop right there. I want to get Kristen's perspective on this because she's got a background where she can have a little bit different.
Well, when I worked at the CIA, I saw a number of classified and unclassified documents. Generally, you go by whether the term classified and what level of classification is actually printed on the document. I don't know that anyone has proven that Secretary of State Clinton took any actually classified documents. There are lots of arguments by her opponents that, well, this information should have been classified. Well, if it wasn't, then it is perfectly legal for her to have that at home. So that's really the question.
Well, and we all know it's not going to come, a classified document's not going to come on that completely different unclassified network.
Correct.
from people outside. And so anyway, we don't want to spend too much time on this because I don't think any of us have the ground truth. I just think there's a lot of frenzy going on.
If you guys had been the prosecutors during the Nixon administration, he would have served out the full term, and you guys would have looked the other way. Do not look the other way
Why
on
would I do
Hillary
that?
Clinton.
You're gonna look
because
the
you're
other- what
looking,
are you
you're
talking
looking
about?
the other way on
Let's
Hillary
just
Clinton.
agree that
You
we
live in
don't
a
have the
parallel
full
universe.
story until the investigation, hopefully an honest investigation is done.
I think
Phyllis,
this is
what
one
do
of
you
these
think?
things where, depending on your partisan spin, you overstate or understate what the issue is. The truth is, it was it was not a good idea for her to do this, and she has said as much, and finally has come around to apologize. And this was something where there's a spirit of the law and the letter of the law, and where she may have followed the spirit of the law, she didn't follow the letter of the law. And I don't think we have to overstate nor understate it. I do think it's interesting that we're in an uproar about this, since Dick Cheney actually literally released the name of a CIA agent for political purposes, and the Republicans kind of whistled past that graveyard with no trouble whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's not exactly what happened, and
That's
you know
pretty-
that's not
that's
exactly what
pretty
happened.
much exactly
and
what happened.
And if Dick Cheney had a separate, imagine if Dick Cheney had a separate
Ima-
server and then had wiped it
Really,
clean
Dick
when
Cheney
the
led us into a
investigators
war and
were
nothing
coming.
happened to him.
Could you
Are you kidding
imagine
me?
how you folks would react to that?
Jim, that a lot of them have servers at home, and some of them are classified
and they
servers.
don't-
and they're set up by the actual IT people for their department.
Hers was private
All right.
and set up. Hers
Let's
was private.
let's move on, and then we'll engage on that in the future when we have a little more facts behind it. We were going to talk about Donald Trump and whether or not. I don't want to spend too much time.
Whether or not he has a
Donald Trump.
server at home.
No, whether or not he has an operational
Whether or not,
brain.
let's go with whether or not he has any policies. John, let's start with you.
I think he's empathy challenged, tolerance challenged. I think he's a bully. I think he's indiscreet. I think it would be a shame and a disgrace if anybody were to make him our representative to the world. People already believe that's who we are, this brash, obnoxious misogynist who has no tolerance for anyone, who speaks particularly of women of late, but also when it comes to diversity, he doesn't accept them. I mean, he could be a KKK candidate. I mean, he goes down to Alabama.
That's unfair.
No, I think it's quite fair, except he probably doesn't discriminate against Catholics. I think that this is a dangerous man. What's really scary to me is the reaction within the Republican Party in support of him, that so many people in America would share this unthinking view. Whatever happened to the dream of America? This guy does not participate in the dream. He's going to show the world. He's going to hurt this one. He's going to hurt that one. I'll tell them. I'll force them. I'll do this. That's
I'll
not
bully
where
the
we should
world
be.
and it'll work.
Yes.
Jim, what do you think?
Well, I think you're being unfair to him. You're doing to him what you're accusing him of doing to others, which is painting with a broad brush and.
You want me to go through the details?
Well, I mean,
Why don't we take his opening statement about immigration? Why not have a wall around the world?
Well, first of all, hold on. Let's look at the differences
Are
between
all
him
Mexicans
and
rapists who
Hillary-
come
and
here?
Hil-
Are all Mexicans
That's all-
rapists?
Did he ever say that?
Yes, he did pretty close. He said there were exceptions to that rule. He said they're not all.
Pretty close. I'm not going to defend.
But we're letting rapists and criminals and
I'm not
Why
defending.
don't
He
we-
is a big boy. He can
Jim,
defend his own
Jim, why don't
statements.
we-
But,
Well, then you
you're
were just
asking
trying
me,
to defend
you're
his
asking me
statements.
to defend statements he didn't actually make.
He did
Jim,
make
why don't we use your skills in understanding inside the party what it is that people are responding to, because he's head and shoulders above all these other candidates.
He's doing what Bernie Sanders is doing, and it sounds
No,
odd
I
to
don't
say,
agree.
but Bernie
One's
Sanders,
philosophical.
whether you dislike or like what he's saying, Bernie Sanders gives the impression that he is being honest, he is being out there. It's
No,
a little
no,
bit
no,
like
no,
what
no.
Joe Biden does, and hold on. A lot of
there's a
people
world
do
of
not
difference.
like,
Bernie
but it's
always
all in what he says. Bernie Sanders, you can dislike what he's saying, but you like that he's saying what he feels. He's not dancing around issues.
No, that's not. No, there's
the
content
same thing
matters.
with you don't have to.
Content matters.
Evidently not in the Democratic and Republican primaries
Yes,
so
it does.
much right
The
now.
Democratic
People
primary,
want honesty, whether
Bernie
they like
Sanders
it, the
is
honesty or
expressing
not.
a point of view to a part of the party that finds his articulation very persuasive. The question is, could he be a presidential candidate? And that philosophical discussion is very different than the appeal to the lowest urges in the American public, what a demagogue does. There
Bernie
is an
Sanders is
articulate.
appealing. Bernie
Okay, you
Sanders
know
is
what?
appealing
Let me-
to some
okay,
very
hold,
bad
hold, hold,
ideas
hold,
that have
okay,
failed
wait,
around
wait,
the world
wait.
and that have led to
All right, guys,
led
let's
to
let
the
Phyllis
Soviet
chime in
Union,
here.
led to a lot of horrible dictatorships.
You know,
accept my premise?
It is September, the year before the election. We are in silly season. Last year, at this 4 years ago, it was Herman Cain and all kind of other people who came up and had their time. And granted, Mr. Trump's time has lasted longer in the sun than any of us had thought it would. But if you look at the polls and you look at the crosstabs of the polls, which I do, Donald Trump.
You're a nerd.
Because I'm a nerd. Because I'm a nerd.
Who loves numbers?
This is true. Who loves numbers? Donald Trump's his unfavorable ratings are higher than his favorables. He tops out at about 35%. He's at 32 right now, so he has really nowhere else to go. So do I think that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee from the Republican Party? Quite frankly, I have more confidence in my country than the belief that Donald Trump can be the nominee of the Republican Party. I think Donald Trump is a master in selling Donald Trump, and the fact that he has all of us talking about him speaks to his skills. But do I think Donald Trump even actually wants to be president? No. And we look at his unfavorabilities. Do I think he'll ever make it there? No. And when we actually start campaigning, when we start actually putting his issues out, and not just some of the things he said that have been sensationalistic and things more recently, but really his past out. When people really start getting past the silliness of all this right now and getting down to who this man both is and has been, I think that this will all pass away. And, you know, again, I have confidence in the American people that we're not going to end up with a nominee Trump. And quite frankly,
Why
Jim,
is
I
Bernie
have
Sanders
confidence.
leading
And
Hillary
quite frankly,
Clinton in New Hampshire?
I have confidence in your party, which is a tough thing. I have confidence in your party that you all have more sense than to make Donald Trump your nominee.
Let me ask,
Can I-
but
that's-
why
that's
is
what
Hillary
I'm gonna
Clinton
say.
losing currently
She's
behind?
not. I've seen
Can I-
that she's
can we
not.
just get into
She's
more-
not, and you
to
know it.
Bernie
She's not. I saw the post
Guys,
this
and the
morning.
Democratic
Guys, things are going to
10-point
change a
difference.
lot over the next year.
She's
But
not,
what I
and
want
you
to
know
get
that.
into
No,
is
so 50, she was behind in the
little-
last poll.
No,
that-
she wasn't.
that I
She's
s-
up by
a
10.
little
No,
more
she's up.
substance. It's changing every day.
Everybody
A
Google
little
it.
more substance. This is, I think, but again, I'm the moderator, I have no opinions. But I'm worried. I'm really worried when I see the rally against the Iran nuclear agreement that is full of nonsense. And I
The
talked to
agreement is full of nonsense, or the rally is full of nonsense?
the Sarah Palin commenting on the Iran nuclear deal. Give me a break. And that whole thing, that whole fear-mongering part of the Trump appeal, that extends to fear of people crossing the border, fear that the Iranians are going to nuke Israel. This is the one thing that stands.
You're not concerned about that?
If you thought that Israel has a nuclear weapon, right? If you thought that Iran was
Yes,
going
I'm
to
concerned
nuke
about
Israel,
anybody nuking anybody in the Middle
right.
East or anywhere
well,
else.
we should be. But this agreement is specifically the only thing that is going to give us an eye on what Iran is doing with their nuclear arsenal. And I want to go to Kristen on that because she has some background.
On everything, on private servers, on nuclear
I'm
weapons.
saying when it comes to these kind of
You're
issues.
another hot potato.
There you go.
What job are you
And
running
then we
for
will
again?
talk about local issues.
Can we talk
But-
about potholes?
But, I mean, we're talking about some really critical things in
Right,
terms
right.
of people using their intellectual capacity to say, wow, I'm not going to look at Donald Trump and Sarah Palin for expertise on the Iran
You know,
nuclear
what I realized
verification
today,
regime.
though, is no matter who
Turns
our-
out
no
we
matter
couldn't
who our
trust
VP not-
John Kerry to cut a
no matter
good
who our
deal either.
presidential nominee is, I think Kristen Umstead should be the VP choice because she really.
Hey, right here
Well,
for
all right,
the
do you want
supervisor.
to chime in on this? I wanted to get away from the Trump personality to the damage that can be done when you listen to the nonsense.
Well, I mean, it's of course a very complex issue, and it's being presented perhaps by both sides, but certainly by the opponents as being a very simplistic one. But I have to say, when I look at interests in the Middle East, I do have to look at, what does Israel think is in its best interests? And when Israel is worried about that kind of deal, I think we may not agree with them, but we have to take their concerns seriously. I don't frankly know that I'm a huge fan of this deal, to be honest. I think, there used to be the saying, trust but verify, and I think verification and the ability to verify constantly is a critical component of this.
Yeah, I just want to chime in for a second there because I consulted one of my former mentor when I did nuclear arms control. I talked to him. He was leading the verification regime for START and START 2 for many, many years for the state and Arms Control and Disarmament Agency. And I asked him about the deal. Like a week later, we had lunch, and he said, this deal has the most comprehensive, detailed, intrusive verification regime of any arms control deal that we have ever done. And this is from someone who is a Republican. Okay, so an expert, a person who leans to the right, tells me this is the best verification regime ever. I'm going to go with him. And then when I hear these
It
people,
sort of explains the arm race during the Cold War, though. It seems that well, you could
Wait,
take that.
I really
You could
want to
take
hear
that
the
as
mayor
saying
who
that
actually
we've
has
never
not spoken
had
that much
really
and
good verification.
actually may have maybe more knowledge than you do about this. If I could just,
Well,
I
she's
mean,
getting-
nobody
she's
was
getting into the heart
lacking.
of, it's
Nobody
not
was
about
lacking
trust.
for nuclear weapons over the last 50 years. so.
negotiations aren't supposed to be about trust and personalities. They're supposed to be about putting on paper explicit agreement. Tit for tat, we'll do this, you'll do that.
You really
and then
think they're going
following
to follow
through.
the agreement? You really think that they're? I mean,
I think if they don't, everyone will know. Kristen, you
And-
wanna
and do
finish?
what?
Well,
And do
there's-
what?
I mean, one
Nothing.
big concern is that the U.S. is going to lose a lot of our European allies in fighting terrorism globally if we don't enter into this agreement. And I mean, international politics, like any politics anywhere, is a matter of, if you lose all your allies, you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. So, that's been a huge concern, I think, for the Obama administration.
And they're all potential targets. A lot of the countries that don't have nuclear deterrent force structure, like Israel, are potential targets of an Iranian tactical or theater nuclear device.
Let me
Anyway.
ask you this. I think this is important. I mean, what
is.
happens if the Iranians build, if they violate this, and you say everyone will know? Well, great, everyone will know. What will happen?
There is a snapback sanctions regime.
Which isn't going to happen. I mean, how in the world are you going to tell you? Yeah, I understand that there's
Why
an
not?
idea,
Why
but we've
not?
just said that the rest of the world doesn't want to impose sanctions anymore. But now, if they break this thing that we signed in order to give them their billions of dollars and so on and stuff like that, that all of a sudden, or whatever the amount of money was, then all of a sudden, now we're going to reimpose sanctions that the rest of the world didn't want to do anyway. This is a free pass.
The sanctions regime was the stick, and the carrot was sit down at the table and let us, the world, the International Atomic Energy Agency, let us create a regime to have transparency into what you're doing. I think we spent too much time on this stuff. I think we got 5 minutes left.
One last thing, though.
Okay.
This is not just we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. This is going to lead to, if the Israelis believe that they're building a nuclear weapon, they are going to take action, and it's going to lead to all sorts of disaster in the Middle East. So this is not a one-sided thing. This could lead to a lot. This could lead to a lot of deaths on both sides.
But that was the trajectory before we got them to the table. It was a 2 to 3 month projection.
I hope
anyway,
you're right.
So let's go to. We have a couple more minutes. I just want to talk.
I have one last observation. If what you say is true, if Israel is so anxious at a time when they don't have a nuclear weapon and they use it, I just can't even imagine
If somebody
what the
is about
full
to
fallout
build,
is politically and otherwise, but they win, right?
If somebody is a week away from completing a nuclear weapon and has missiles, which we've allowed them to have during this in this great agreement, supposedly great agreement, they have the missiles. They're a week away from
But we're not
building
snoring
it.
at a beach
What are
while
you-
this is going on.
What are the surrounding countries going to do? You're essentially this
They
leads
would
to a
support.
potential war.
They would
Well, does
support
anyone
the
actually
sanctions
ever
in
think
action.
also that the Republicans never have an answer, they just have criticism about these things, and the fact that the entire region was destabilized by a war that didn't have to happen and that we were lied into in the beginning? Does anyone ever think
there's
about
a
that
lot of
stuff?
It was
a lot of stuff that goes
it
back
was certainly
there.
a super stable region in the beginning.
Well, it
before that. I mean, it was.
actually
it
was.
wasn't this. It wasn't
It
this.
was. The
But
strongman theory seemed to
that's
work.
what
Not
we're-
what we like.
Different
But Phyllis
definitions of
brings out
peaceful.
another aspect of this complex issue, which apparently we're all enjoying, is that that we are actually allied with Iran in countering ISIL. So that's another angle on the very complex situation in the Middle East. I think we have like 2 minutes, just kind of shifting really quick to Mark Herring is not running for governor. And
Makes sense.
And running again for Attorney General. And just some quick comments on that.
Well, he's got a great job, and in some respects, more opportunities than he'd have as governor fighting a General Assembly. And as a lawyer myself, who's had opportunities with issues, and he's shown profile, so he's digging into the issues. I think.
What do you mean he's shown profile?
Well, he's taken on very controversial issues, same-sex marriage, etc. And so I think that if I were in his position, I'd say, this is a terrific job. Why do I want to give this up?
This week, Mark announced that Attorney General Herring announced that he actually is going to start tackling the issue of all the untested rape kits around Virginia. So people who have been raped and have not had any justice in that. Mark is Attorney General Herring is an amazing Attorney General who's done a fantastic job. He has been bold. He has been shown real leadership in this position, and this is when we say elections matter. Imagine if Mr. Herring had not been in this office. Elections matter, and he has been an amazing Attorney General, and I'm very happy he
Kristen,
made this
do you have
choice.
a quick comment on that?
I think Ralph Northam is going to be a strong candidate for governor, and I think Mark will be a very strong candidate for re-election.
Awesome. We got to cut off right now. We'll get, if Jim, you want to say something after the break, we'll be right back with the Road 2. See you in a few minutes.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. One nation.
Under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty.
And justice.
For all.
In America, there's either room for everyone, or it's not America. Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
You'd never know it on the battlefield. But nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
I'm sick of this. I'm sick of dealing with you. I'm sick of
I work 6 days a week.
Who
do you think you
Stand
are?
up straight. Don't you ever talk back to me again! You just shut up!
What are you crying about?
What a child learns about violence, a child learns for life. Teach carefully. We can show you how. Act Against Violence. Call 877-ACT-WISE for a free brochure.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promise.
Okay, hon.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promise.
What kind of man are you? I'm a father. Look here, my father was a father, and he smoked his brains out in the house.
Watch as he blows those smoke rings on my little red face.
You probably have asthma.
Asthma? Schmasma. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen to your kids.
I swear.
Don't swear when you're lying. You know very well that thousands of kids get bronchitis, ear infections, and even pneumonia from their parents' cigarette smoke. And didn't you promise your little angels you'd smoke outside?
Hey, Daddy.
Those little devils are just so sweet.
Do the right thing.
Please, smoke outside.
Until you can stop, go out for your kids.
Take the pledge. Call 1-800-513-1157.
As time flows on, there are places we return to again and again. Precious places. Timeless places. Places that, with your help, can endure forever. I'm Paul Newman. Help the Nature Conservancy save the last great places around the world.
Welcome back to the second half of the Road 2. We're going to shift gears and get into local politics, especially with our two candidates here. Kristen Umstadt, who's running for a seat on the Board of Supervisors from Leesburg District, and Phyllis Randall, who's running for the chairwoman of the Board of Supervisors in Loudoun County. Anyway, so I'm going to let you guys take it. One of the issues we wanted to raise was sort of the fundraising gap. The current board is all Republicans, right? So having run for office myself, I know that people who are already in office get a big boost because they're the incumbent. So how are you dealing with that, Kristen?
Well, it's a little bit different in my race because there isn't an incumbent, and I'm outraised my Republican opponent 2-1. Okay. So it doesn't really apply, but I suppose I could fit into a more incumbent type category because I've been in office for now 23 years. But in general, it is much harder for challengers to raise money, and that's across the board in every election, in every state. And it's because the incumbents have had a chance to make more connections, I think, with some of the special interests.
Yeah.
And there are some very powerful special interests in Loudoun County, the development industry being a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the gap comes. Now, there's a good saying: you can beat someone who has 7 times as much money as you if you outdo them on door to door, and that's what we as Democrats always are committed to doing. So I'd turn it over to Phyllis.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I would say, Mayor Umstadt, who has endorsed me, and I'm so proud to have your endorsement. Since you've outraised your opponent 2-1, can have a campaign donation. Let's just start there. I think it also matters who you're willing to take money from. The truth is, we were just talking about Mr. Trump, who is a racist and a bigot and a sexist and has said some horrible things, has talked about a war hero, and he's not a good person, and has actually come into Loudoun and clear cut some of the trees in Loudoun to build the Trump Resort. And in looking at my opponent, Mr. York's campaign fundraising, he accepted thousands of dollars from Mr. Trump. So there have been people who have come forward to offer me money, and depending on who you are, I won't take your money. There are, for me, and this, I'm just talking about myself, I have some guidelines, some things that guide me morally, and there are some people that it's not worth me not being able to look in my mirror to take your money. And so, yes, some of the special interests that come in, that's a problem. In fact, he's an incumbent, that is true, but also that
he's a 12-year
actually
incumbent
he's a 16-year incumbent as chair and a 20-year incumbent on the board. So he has great name recognition. He's been around for a long time.
You guys
but
used
he's
to like
also,
Scott York.
I've never liked Scott York.
Well,
I don't know who you guys are.
Democrats overall.
I don't, I think
like
Scott York has been an effective chameleon, and that he changes his stripes as it suits him. He doesn't really have a core or a base. He goes where the votes are, and there are times that he has courted Democrats, and there are times last time he ran, he literally hugged Eugene DeGadio, quite literally, to get back into the Republican Party. So he has been an effective chameleon, and he has fooled some of the people some of the time. But I think most of the people are tired of being fooled by him and tired of being jerked around by him, and I think his time has come.
There's a Republican nominee also.
Let's go right to what you would be doing differently as chair. I think that's a crucial substantive thing that we need to give you time to talk.
Well, thank you so much. I think the first thing, and I know I've talked about this from the beginning of the campaign, and Mr. York has kind of dismissed it, is when chair, the first thing we will do, we're going to sign an ethics pledge. The Loudoun County Board of Supervisors right now is not sitting under an ethical code of behavior. Mr. York said, and I quote, that the ethics pledge was simply for show. I find that amazing. Our military signs an ethics pledge. We have kids in college who sign an ethics pledge. Even in high school, there's an honor code for some of the kids in AP classes. And for him to say that ethics and transparency do not matter is an issue. Let's talk to the issue of transparency. You know, I was the chair of the Virginia Fair Housing Board, and so I know there's a broad discretion for when you can go into executive session. But this board has went into executive session and decided things that were crucial to the county county more times than any board in the past. Yes, you have to go in when you need litigation
Does that
or
mean
counsel.
the public is not allowed?
The public is not allowed.
Okay.
And not to mention, so you have to go in for litigation or counsel, you have to go in for personnel reasons, you have to go in with some of the contract negotiations, but there are many times that you do not have to go into an executive session. And also, let's just talk a little bit about the taxpayers' money. This week, Scott York led the board in approving $60,000, which I think will end up being higher, a mailing to go out to all the people in Loudoun on the issue of transportation. Now, Mr. York has been talking about for years how, Loudoun is a internet county and these things can be put on the website and put it on, and this board, this Republican-only board, approved unanimously to spend $60,000 on a mailing to go out 2 weeks before the election. And of course, these issues could not have waited for a week after the election to go before. So that, there are a myriad of issues. He's not a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars. He's not an ethical person as far as leading his board and signing an ethics pledge. He has been a chameleon in so many different ways. He is not transparent. And most important, I think this is something interesting. When Dr. Hattrick, who had been our chair of our school board, was looking at retiring, Scott York made the comment that sometimes it's just time for a change. And sometimes it's just time for a new leadership and for people to step down. He made that statement a year and a half ago. I think we're going to use those same words, and he should use that same statement. It's time for a change.
And that's why we should have a Republican chairman of the Board of Supervisors. Because Scott York's an independent.
He's a Republican right now.
But he's running as an independent.
Because he's a chameleon. So yes, I do know that.
Anyway, Kristen, you are aspiring to be on this board.
Yes.
How would you distinguish your service on the board, issue-wise?
From the current board?
Yes.
You look at the current board, they are under a lot of pressure from those who want to open up what's called the transition zone, the zone between the rural west and the more densely populated east. There's a lot of pressure to open it up to development. And what happens if you just approve residential development after residential development is because homes do not pay the full cost of the services they consume, you get more and more pressure on your existing taxpayers to increase the tax burden on them. And that's, I think, one of the fundamental arguments against out-of-control growth, which is what we've largely seen in Loudoun County in recent years.
Yeah. And how does the business base that you can attract, have we kind of saturated that? Is there room for more business?
I think there is. Now, Fairfax County, I think, is losing Mobil Oil to, I believe, Houston. But when they recruited Mobil Oil decades ago, they used a method that I think worked superbly them, and it's a model I think we can apply now to any kind of business recruitment in the county, which is you use your existing businesses, your banking institutions, your real estate agents as a united group to go out and recruit a large corporation or a mid-sized corporation to your county. And so on hand, as soon as they say, well, what do we do with all our employees if we move there? Well, we have mortgage bankers who are at the ready to provide them with mortgages. We have space already located for you. We have builders who will build to suit to meet your needs. You use your existing ambassadors to their full capacity. I'm not sure that the county has done that so much in recent years, but I think that's something we need to do across the board as we recruit more good businesses into the county.
We also want to diversify the businesses that are in the county. Right now we have something like 59 data centers. Data centers are great. They give you a tax base, but they don't employ very many people, and we don't have a very diversified.
Monstrous buildings.
Monstrous buildings.
They don't use services. They don't use much in services.
But they don't employ people either. And one of the best things you have to do is, one thing Loudoun has a problem is transportation. Traffic is horrible, and when we talk about people coming to live in Loudoun, when I read a study recently that said, what are the things people look at before they decide? What do CEOs and companies decide before they want to move their business in? And they but besides the tax base, they also look at things like your schools, transportation, amenities, green space, all those types of things, which have been, quite frankly, especially our schools, devastated by this county board to the tune of $95 million in 3 years. And
They're still spending more than they were when the board came in, right?
But it doesn't keep up with the growth of the students that are coming in. And
they still spend more per student, don't they?
No, they do not. In fact, the student has went down. The per pupil allocation
How much do they spend
has
per
went down.
student?
We're now spending about $12,000, which is decreased from what it used to be. So
Does that include the capital budget?
well, the CIP actually, I'm glad you asked because the CIP is 12%. You know why the CIP is 12%? Because we keep building houses without building the infrastructure before we build the house.
CIP is 12%.
The capital infrastructure. The school budget of Loudoun County is 72% of the county budget. 12% of that is CIP, capital infrastructure projects. Okay. Capital infrastructure projects are for building new schools. We have to build new schools because they keep building homes without first thinking of the infrastructure that goes into building a home. So in other words, we've built, but it hasn't been wise or well planned or smart. And so actually, in the end, it actually does cost us more money to build in the way we have done this. And so, if you want to, be an advocate for Charlie King, you go on and do that. I want you to speak up for Charlie.
For spending money wisely and for Charlie King.
Tell us Charlie King. Most of the
Charlie
audience
King is the Republican nominee, and you seem to be running against Scott York, but also Charlie King is the Republican nominee. Scott York, who a lot of Democrats used to think was just fantastic, is an independent. So what I'm concerned about is
Scott York is sitting on that board right now as a Republican.
Running as an independent.
He's running as an independent for the third time because he goes back and forth as the political wind suits him.
So if you want a real Republican leadership, you should have Charlie King.
And I think you should advocate for Charlie King. Go on, I'm listening.
Tell us about Charlie King.
Tell us about Charlie King.
Well, you haven't said anything bad about Charlie King, so
there's nothing to say about him. All you can say about him is he was the lawyer for Delgadio. Well, how perfect. We have an unethical chairman, and we have a lawyer who represented Delgadio, who's himself unethical, discriminatory, and violates the law.
Confused.
Other than that,
York was against Delgadio, and you're against
we need
York.
a Democrat.
So
no, we're not against.
All right, just for the sake of the audience, John,
York actually hugged Delgadio when he needed him. Now he doesn't need him anymore.
Could you speak to Delgadio and Charlie King? Because most of the audience has no idea what we're talking about. So please calmly inform.
Charlie King is going to would be a strong steward of the taxpayer dollars.
Before we get into that,
I'll start, and then after I
will
draw a breath,
I will explain what you really meant.
You'll explain how I got it wrong. Right?
There you go. Okay.
Eugene Delgadio, he used public funds to basically campaign for his office. That's the simplest way to put it.
He is the supervisor.
He is the supervisor
Sterling.
from Sterling.
Oddly, the legal system didn't seem to believe that, but okay. Innocent until proven guilty. I'm sorry. That's old-fashioned.
Go ahead.
Well, okay, let's address that. The facts are indisputable that he did what I just said. You as a voter don't have to indict somebody, convict them, put them in jail, or any of these other things. The Board of Supervisors of Republicans, they disapproved of what he did.
And actually, let me just say, the legal system didn't say he didn't do it. The legal system said he's a part-time employee, so he didn't fall under the same standards. They actually said, were he a full-time employee, he would have actually been indicted for that. So let's be really clear before we talk about
let's be really clear. I mean, if we want to go down the list of things.
But as a part-time employee, it didn't apply to him. That's what they said. Which is not the same thing as saying he didn't do it.
Did the supervisor break any laws?
Yes, he did. He did, in my opinion. You asked,
I'm telling you. Did the court system, in your opinion, did the court system...
In my opinion...
Do we believe that people are innocent? Do we believe that people are innocent until proven guilty?
Are you giving a legal opinion based on...
I'm giving a legal opinion that this whole thing was a cover-up, that a judge who promised us a day in court denied us that day in court after we objected to the prosecutor's impartiality in handling the case and competence. as reflected in a series of papers that fill about a ream. All of that said and done, had I been the prosecutor, he would have been prosecuted for several existing sections of the code. But I was not the prosecutor. The judge hamstrung us in challenging him. So we throw it to the vote of the people. Should they have a person like Delgadio, Delgadio, who discriminates against people based on what their religious beliefs are when he hires them, that he takes public funds and he uses it for his campaign to raise funds from people. In other words, he abuses his office.
All of which the courts did not find you to be right on.
No, the court didn't address any of these issues.
But wait,
the prosecutor folded.
Like
the prosecutor.
If we want to have a factual discussion about Mr. Delgadio, it is a fact that the Severn Poverty Law Center has deemed that he runs a hate group, and that he's the only elected official in America who runs a hate group. So if we want to have a discussion, you're talking about facts.
We were having a discussion about you and Charlie King, and then he brought in Eugene Delgadio. I'm not sure how he got to Eugene Delgadio.
Well, it's easy. It's very easy.
Brought him in, and
it's
I'm
very
pointing
easy.
out,
It's
I'm
very
just being
easy.
the guy standing up for our justice system.
It's very easy.
Silly me.
It's very easy. We have a corrupt county. We have a chairman of the board who gets petitions from real estate developers, and they help him in his campaign. At the same time, they're making that petition. That exchange may not technically be a crime, but it's not the way to do business, and wouldn't happen if you had the disclosure that Phyllis will have when she's chair. Eugene Delgadio was kicked off by his friends and political associates for his conduct, which doesn't bother you, but I expect is going to bother the voters.
Well, regardless of what bothers or doesn't bother me, he wasn't kicked off the Board of Supervisors.
He was stripped of all of his authority as a member of the Board of Supervisors, removing the representational identity he was supposed to have for the people of Sterling that had to be filled in by the other members of the Board of Supervisors,
But you are making
including the former representative of that group of people. And in addition, now, who do we think should replace the current chair before he changed his mind, which he probably had never changed his mind. He just lay there in the weeds waiting for his moment. We should have the lawyer of Delgadio. Now there's a combination. A fella who was terrible is going to have his lawyer.
Beat you in a court case.
No, he didn't beat me in a court case. I wasn't a party. If I'd been a party, he would have been convicted.
The truth is,
my client didn't lose.
John, the truth is, on a county level, partisan politics shouldn't matter and don't matter as much, because we talk about things like land use and transportation and education. So on a county level, what you want to have is somebody who is ethical, somebody who is transparent, somebody who knows that the government belongs to the people. That is neither Charlie King.
Do not believe Charlie King is
that is
any of
neither
those
Charlie King nor Scott York.
Yes, we want a board that's sober and not-violent and not-intolerant.
I thought we weren't name-calling, but I guess again.
What do you mean?
I'm gonna give some positive time to Kristen, because she's got years and years of experience in Leesburg and Loudoun County, and I want to hear what, how does progress appear to you in the next 4 to 5 years on the Board of Supervisors? What should change from the past 4 years?
When she's elected.
Well, thank you. The primary reason that I'm running, and that many of the challengers are running this year, is that we saw what happened firsthand in the public schools with the $95 million worth of cuts from the superintendent's budgets over 3 years. And I'm not just saying, cut 95 million and it's a horror show. What I'm saying is I personally observed what has happened in the schools, because my daughter just graduated from the Loudoun County Public Schools after spending 13 years there. So I saw increasing crowding in the classrooms to the point that there is literally not the room to put another desk in those classrooms. People have to climb over each other to get in and out of their desks. Teachers are not given the funds even to have teacher workbooks for the courses they are teaching. Printers and copiers break down, and the last month of school, there is no way to print anything out at school. Now, if you're a family, as many Loudoun families are, who have computers and high-speed internet and printers at home, well, and your child's well organized, and we were lucky to have all of that, our daughter could print things off at home before she went to school, but if you don't have the resources, you're relying on those printers and computers in the library. The computers crash. They crash during standardized tests, and they crash all the time. To get one that works, my daughter had to go through 3 different computers in the library at Loudoun County High School to find one that would actually work. And then you've got the question whether the printer it feeds to is going to work, and that's another
And this
struggle.
is in one of the richest counties in the United
It is.
States.
That
It
leads
is.
to a question, though, considering
Crazy.
how much money we are spending on education in Loudoun County. If the computers are not working, you don't necessarily have to buy new computers. You have to talk and find out what's going on with the IT people that can't keep computers running.
Are you serious?
Because you
I
should be,
can't believe-
absolutely.
Well,
I-
you
I-
are from
I-
another
I hate-
planet.
I
You
hate
don't
to
have a kid.
I hate
You don't
to-
have a kid.
Yeah,
You
I
know what
understand-
they're doing
I
in these
understand
schools?
I clearly
If
understand
they
technology
don't heat
better
the
than some
schools,
people.
they do not heat the schools to save money.
But that's not what we're talking
and they
about.
close the schools
That's not
because
what we're
they're
talking
cold.
about.
That is what we're talking
We're
about. We're talking about
I'm
resources
specifically-
for kids to be able to think
So
and
you-
to be able to work and to be able to produce and get the resources, printed material they
we
need to learn. That's what we're talking about.
We just heard that the Loudoun, if the schools need more money, well, first thing to do is
Our
you need
board
to find
denied
out,
it. Our
you
board
need to
denied
find
it.
out how to get more out of the money we give,
Oh,
and
come
then
on.
you can ask
When's the
for
last
additional
time
money.
there was an
We just said
objective
there's over
assessment
$12,000 a year,
You know,
and that does not
okay,
even
okay,
include
well,
capital
okay,
costs.
okay, you know,
That's a lot of money.
If you want
can
to
we spend it
focus
more
on,
efficiently?
if you want to focus on
I'd
the
like
IT
to help
people,
the
you can do
students.
that. I want to focus on the fact that cutting that funds meant a couple of things, because
But you haven't demonstrated
when you
there
cut
was a
that money,
cut.
when you cut.
You haven't demonstrated there was a cut.
You know what? You have more common sense than that. So I'm not even going to respond to that.
There's
when you
more
cut
money
that much
coming
money
in
out
than
of the
there was
school,
before.
and there are more
That's not a
kids in there
cut.
than
My
there were before
understanding.
too. So you know that. And again, you can play the political politics. That's your job. I understand that. You do a great job when we sit in this panel. But you got enough common sense to understand when you have
I
more
understand
kids,
you don't throw
can't
out
have less more
computers if there's a
pupils.
if
But
there's
you
a
also
virus problem.
understand
You
this.
get
Do you
IT
also
people who
understand
can
this?
fix the
Do you also
problem.
understand there was a $95 million and 3-year
If my
cut?
car needs an oil change, I don't throw it
trickle
away.
down to the schools. And for Loudoun County, you know what that meant? That meant that after school buses were cut. Why is that important? Because after school activities actually matter. You know, when you go to apply to college, of course they ask you what your GPA was and that type of thing. But also what you do extracurriculum outside of that matters also. That means that the middle school deans were cut. Library assistants were cut. Summer school
Middle school deans were cut?
Middle school deans, assistant deans were cut. Assistant deans were cut. Summer school
How many assistant deans does the
summer
average
school
middle school have?
was cut. And the truth is this, when we have these cuts, the kids who are least able to absorb these cuts are the ones that are most hurt
So if
by
we
it.
don't have enough people in
The kids that are
administration,
least able
you're
to
advocating
absorb
for more
these
money
cuts
for mid-level
are the ones who are
administration in
most hurt by
schools.
them. The kids who are least able to absorb these cuts are the most hurt by them.
Could we
And
focus
those
on the
kids
actual
actually
education
often,
first, please?
Those kids are also the constituents of Scott York and all the rest of that board. But they don't focus on those people whatsoever. It's a problem. We're going to change it in November.
Okay.
I'd like to focus on the actual education, but okay.
You guys, we have a couple more minutes. I just want to give our candidates the remaining time to kind of say anything that you'd like to say about why you're in this race and what your expectations are for your winning.
Do you want to go?
Well, first I want to say that in all seriousness, Mayor Umstad has been just a stalwart in Loudoun County in so many ways for 23 years. And the fact that she's on the ticket with me and has endorsed me is such an honor. And in addition, I've been endorsed by the Loudoun Teachers Association, and I've been endorsed by our Attorney General. And I'm very proud of those endorsements. Those mean a lot to me. I'm running because I think that Loudoun can be better. It does not mean a county is not a strong, viable county, but sometimes, you know, Loudoun is not, everyone does not feel the success of Loudoun County. And there are many people who were left out of the Loudoun County story, and they are ignored and they are pushed aside. And the truth is, you know, this is one of these times where if somebody else is brought into the success of Loudoun County, it does not mean that anyone has to suffer. A rising tide lifts all ships, and we can do this smart, and we can do this better, and we can do this with more ethics and transparency. And after a while, after 20 years on the board, sometimes change is good. It's time for a change. I'm running, and I hope that the voters go to my website, www.randallforchair.com, read my positions, support me in November, and oh, by the way, when you go to the polls, don't go alone, take you plus 2. Thank you.
You plus 2. I hadn't heard that one before. I like that.
Well, it's an honor to be here with Phyllis, and I've been a great admirer of hers for many years, but I'm running for many of the same reasons she's running. What really got me motivated was watching what was happening in the public schools over the last 13 years, and I'd like to make a difference, to work with the schools, make sure that they have the resources they need, that all the children in the schools have equal access to those resources. Despite what Jim thinks, the Loudoun County Public Schools spend half or less of what a private school would spend on educating each child. So it's a fairly financially efficient. That's
not true at all.
It's a fairly financially efficient operation.
Are you talking about? We're not talking about St. Albans.
The Loudoun County schools are very efficient in that respect. But the teachers need backup that they're not currently getting. And you know, when I look at that issue, and that's one of the key issues that will bring good businesses to Loudoun County, and if we let our schools deteriorate in the quality of education, we're going to lose that business investment in the county. And that the business community can be one of our strongest allies in making sure kids have access to apprenticeships, to internships, and that they learn about what it is to be in the job market, which is what we need to prepare them for.
That's she specifically mentioned one of my positions and misconstrued it, I'm sure unintentionally. If you want to compare the public school system to Sidwell Friends or St. Albans or something like that, yes, I feel certain that they spend much more money. But if you compare it to a lot of schools, say your average Catholic school or your average religious school, where they have much stricter budgets, the teachers in many cases get paid much less. There's a lot less cost of administration. Look at charter schools, non-denominational, non-religious charter schools. A lot of places
charter
do
schools
a lot
have public
less,
school money.
And they get better results with similar amounts of money.
No, they don't.
I don't think the Dominican doesn't pay
I think we need to pick up this debate.
I'm saying there are many ways to do it. Let's focus on education.
Jim, we have to wrap it up.
Okay.
Sadly, and this is a good debate, a very, very important debate. But I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope we weren't a little too over the top, but we feel very passionate about a lot of these issues. So please join us again next month for The Road To.